Hey, Orange One here. So in this video I want to go over damage calculations in Caves of Qud. I think that they can be pretty in-depth, but in this video I want to give a general overview, give some general rules of thumb. So the first thing that I want to talk about was there's, in the game they talk about 1d6 or 1d8 or 1d12s, or even I think there might be an item or two with 1d3s. This refers to having one dice that's 6-sided, or one dice that's 8-sided, or one dice that's 12-sided, so on and so forth. So just to give you basic statistics on that, a 6-sided dice, you can get numbers 1 through 6, so the average value you get from that is 3.5. The average value you would get from an 8-sided dice would be 4.5. But you have this whole range of numbers that you can get. When we're talking about the piercing value of a weapon, that is compared to the defender's armor value. So you can see your armor value up in the upper right hand corner next to your other statistics, right here. And you can see the weapon's piercing value by looking at the item. And you can also look at some items that enemies that have on them. I don't think you can check the piercing value on an enemy's weapon, but if you're familiar with the item, you can know what it is out of game. In general, if you have a piercing value that's higher than an armor value, for each level over, you get another dice roll. It's a little bit more complicated than that. On average, you would get one more dice roll. I'll go over the detailed calculations later. But if you have an armor value that's equal to the piercing value, in general you're going to get one dice or no rolls. It's not going to pierce on average. If you've got a piercing value that's less than the armor value, you get no dice rolls on average. You will occasionally pierce the armor due to how it's calculated, but on average you're not going to be piercing the armor. In general, take things that have higher piercing values over items that have large number on the dice. One example of this that I was trying to figure out was the electro bow versus the laser rifle. Sure, the laser rifle has a D12, but it has one less piercing value. So sure, the electro bow has a D6, and that might sound worse, but it has that extra piercing, which means you're on average going to get one more dice roll, which means you've got the same maximum minimum, but now you're rolling two 6-sided dice versus one 12-sided dice. I said I wasn't going to go in depth here, but it's sample size basically. You should roll 2 d6s if you want more consistent results. If you want things that are going to have high damage suddenly but also have low damage suddenly, sure, go for the 1d12. But in general, you want something that's going to have more dice rolls, so go for more piercing value. It's better even if it has a low dice roll. If it has a higher piercing value, go for it. Now for your chance to actually hit a target, you need to make a roll. You roll a 1d20 plus your weapon's 2-hit modifier, plus your agility bonus, which you would see on your stats page, similar to your strength bonus for your piercing value, against the defender's dodge value. So it's just a comparison of your attacker's dice roll to the defender's DV. For 2-hit modifier, that's pretty easy to see for melee weapons. So for most weapons, you need to get a skill to get a higher boost in your 2-hit chance. Most of them, like the axe or the cudgel, you get a +2. With the sword, it depends on the stance that you're taking. With a short sword, I think you get +1 by default, and different abilities also kind of affect that 2 chance hit. If it's a 1d20 dice roll plus that 2 hit chance, I think the highest bonus you really get in the game is around like 6-ish. So if you can get like a DV of 26, you're gonna dodge most, if not all, attacks. If the enemy does roll a natural 20, then you're going to get, there's a chance for them to hit still. You know, it's like an D&D, if you roll 20, something special happens even if you don't achieve your goal. So basically what you want to do is look at your items to hit chance. Weapons, like ranged weapons, they've got different to hit chances based off of kind of what you would expect. Like a sniper rifle is going to have a huge accuracy bonus, so that really helps with hitting. Electro bow is also incredibly accurate. Stuff like the laser rifle, not as much. The Engen rifle, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but anyways, the Engen rifle gives you, it's not very accurate, it's pretty inaccurate. So these different items have accuracies that depend on them. So you want to keep that in mind when you're talking about these dodge values. And you can also up your dodge value by getting different skills, like there's some agility skill trees, like there's things like Spry and other abilities that will help you dodge attacks while you're running. So those are pretty darn useful, especially if you're gonna be a melee character trying to close that distance between you and someone who's shooting at you. That helps having that. But in general, I don't worry too much about dodge value. I tend to go for more accurate weapons anyways, and so most of the time I hit. My issue is more around penetration. So also, if you want to modify these different values, you want to look at your armor that you're wearing. Armor is the normal way of modifying your armor and dodge value. Usually armor is either really good at armor values or dodge values. It's very rare until you get to late game that something gives you both. So you want to build your character accordingly. Do you want to dodge, or do you want to have consistent armor? Myself personally, I would prefer to have something with consistent damage absorption and preventing damage than something that is going to be, if you get hit a few times, if you get a couple unlucky dice rolls, then you'll be straight up dead. As a personal preference, I've heard great things about dodge value builds being really OP at the end game, but it's just easier for me to go with armor. If you have some mutations, like we have multiple limbs, it averages out the armor that you're wearing. So if you have multiple legs, it's going to average out your leg armor. So having 2 sets of steel legs plates is going to give you the same armor protection that 1 pair would give a normal non-mutated character. This can be kind of exploited so that you get some boosts to speed from like moccasins while also having some decent armor protection, so you can kind of use that to your advantage. You can also magnetize armor. You're not going to do that till like the late game though, but if you get a high-powered magnet or the blueprint for that, you can magnetize some armor and it'll add to your armor values. And also sometimes items have some modifiers that you can put on them, some mods. So you can, if you get a blueprint for a weapon modification like Masterwork or like Serrated, you can change the values on these things. Like there's I believe Flexi Weaved, which takes off 3 of the dodge value penalties of armor, so you can put Flexi Weaved on some heavy armor and it'll help you dodge more consistently. There's also some abilities that will change more of your piercing value. Usually, like there's plenty of abilities in the game that will make you pierce more. There's some items that will help you, I think, like the Skybear's jetpack. I forgot what it's called now, but that will give you a charge attack which does more piercing. So there's some items that you can do to up your piercing. And then there's like Honey Hulk, which ups your strength, which will up, if you're using a melee weapon, that will up your piercing value. And there's some artifacts that also just boost your base stats. So you might find a randomly generated artifact in a Sultan's holy site or historic site that will boost things. Like in my Let's Play, I found one that boosted my agility by 1. Or you might also find Eater's Injector, which is like this holy tonic which will make you have a boosted stats. So that will up your piercing value if you have higher strength. Also up your ability to dodge if you've got higher agility, so on and so forth. Grenades are essential in this game. They are so overpowered. I cannot stress that enough. You can't dodge them. They tend to lay down areas of effect attacks that can lock down enemies really, really nicely. For example, there's things like the freeze grenade. That's my favorite because you can just freeze enemies and then you can shoot them, you can run away. They're not going to attack you for a turn or two at least, depending on the strength of the grenade. There's 3 tiers of grenades. There's 1, 2, and 3, which will have stronger effects. There's the sleep grenade, which if you're playing on the more recent versions is huge, because now that's going to, I think they said +4 for the piercing value if a target is asleep. So you can put someone to sleep and then just destroy them. You can pierce them really well. There's also things like the acid grenades, which are great for taking down enemies if you can get them locked down in the acid, but they will also destroy items. So you want to be careful about if you're thinking like, do I want to take this Templar's sweet gear? You may not want to acid grenade them. But if you're like, I don't know, killing like slug snouts or something that's some wildlife that's not got an unborn item, you could totally use an acid grenade. Thermal grenades are really great because they light enemies on fire, and fire is really, really dangerous in this game. If you can throw all of those onto some water and generate steam, it will insta-kill most enemies, but you want to be careful because that steam can also kill you, so you don't want to be doing that underground where you can't really escape from the steam. EMP grenades, really, really nice. As you would expect, they disable robots, then you can get attacks off on those robots. And there's a ton of great grenades. Those are the ones that come to mind when I'm thinking about the ones in my Let's Play. There's also the resonance grenade, which is really nice for well, taking out walls and doors, because it will destroy all inorganic matter nearby. It will also hurt organic matter pretty badly too. You don't want to use that anywhere you think that there's gonna be some loot right behind the door, but it can really, really be nice if you want to get through a door to go down another level or something. I cannot stress how overpowered grenades are. They're absolutely amazing. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about psychic powers and abilities. They're kind of tricky. You know, if you build a mutant around being an Esper, you can deal huge damage against melee characters, like crazy damage. It works similar to your armor. Your mental armor is kind of like your armor value, and your ego gives you more piercing. Basically, if you've got really high ego, you can get multiple rolls. And so if you have like a pretty decent psychic character fighting someone who's not, you can usually one-shot or two-shot them with things like Sunder Mind. So it's really really nice ability to invest in if you're gonna go that way, but you also tend to be pretty squishy if you're investing that way to physical attacks. So someone with physical could also take you out pretty quickly if they get close or have a good ranged weapon. Some of the abilities that I really, really like myself that I've played with in the past is like Fire Hands, Sunder Mind, and Force Bubble. Fire Hands is good because it just gives you a little bit of damage. You can also light people on fire and do the whole steam trick I was talking about earlier. Sunder Mind is very consistent mental damage. It does have a pretty long cooldown at its lower levels, but once you get it high, you can churn those out pretty regularly. Force Bubble or Force Wall, both of those abilities help you just put up some defenses, so if a melee character is wanting to cut you in half, you can just wait behind that, or even trap them. If you have Force Wall, you can trap them in a little force bubble around them, and then you can do some mental attacks on them, or wait for your cooldown on your mental attack to go away. Also, there's psychic weapons, which are pretty rare from my experience, but you can do a lot of damage with those things against physical enemies. Instead of using your strength, though, it uses, I think it's your ego. Yeah, which will allow you to do a lot of physical damage up close, which is super cool. Enemies, some enemies of the Sightless Way, some of those guys carry those weapons, which you want to keep an eye out for if you're a melee character or physical character or a ranged physical character. Alright, well that's all I wanted to cover. Thank you for joining me. This has been Orange One.